it is officially fall, which means pumpkin spice is everywhere and in everything, and I am very excited about it. I am a major sucker for pumpkin spice anything. And today I want to show you one of my favorite recipes for fall. It is my recipe for pumpkin spice scones with maple spiced glaze. For this recipe, I do like using a food processor. It just seems to blend everything up really nicely because I like to use old-fashioned oats, and you have to use cold butter. And so I really like how it works with this recipe, and I use it for all my scone recipes. But if you do not have a food processor, you should go out and get one. You can just use a handheld pastry cutter, but I would recommend using the quick cooking oats instead of the old-fashioned. And so that's just something to keep in mind before getting started with this recipe. Another thing to remember when getting started when making scones, at least this recipe, is to use very cold ingredients such as the butter and the milk. And I'll go over that as we talk about the recipe, but just make sure the butter is really, really cold before you get started. In the food processor, place 1.5 cups of whole wheat flour. I actually like using what's called white whole wheat flour, and it's made by a company called King Arthur makes it. I think there are some other brands that make it as well. And it kind of gives you the lightness of a white flour, but still the hardiness of a wheat flour. I don't know how they make it, but it's a pretty good balance. If you can find that, I do recommend it. But if not, you can use half whole wheat flour and half regular flour, or all of both. So all whole wheat or all unbleached. So either way is fine, but it is 1.5 cups. Either way. So 1.5 cups of flour and 1 cup of oats. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. I like to use old-fashioned if I'm using the food processor, but if you're using a handheld pastry cutter, then I would recommend using the quick cooking. And to that I add in 1/3 cup of turbinado sugar or brown sugar. Turbinado sugar is more of like the sugar in the raw. And so I made it that way, which is what you can see here. And I've also used brown sugar. I think I actually like using the brown sugar a little bit more, but if you're trying to go for a healthier option, I would say the turbinado is a good substitution because it's a little bit less processed. But I love the molasses in the brown sugar. So either way is completely fine, but it is 1/3 cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1.5 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. And if you have not made homemade pumpkin pie spice, I highly recommend it. It is one of my favorite things to bake with. I bake it all throughout the fall season and the winter season as well. You can put it in so many different things. So I have that recipe on my website, fromscratchwithmaria.com. I will put it in the description box below. And you can also see, I'll also put the link to the video. So I have a video on my channel for how to make it as well, and I use a secret ingredient. So in order to see the secret ingredient that I use, click on the video. Once you make homemade pumpkin pie spice, I promise you, you will never go back to store-bought. I promise. And now for the butter. This is 1/2 cup of butter, which is 1 stick, and I cut it into about 1/2 inch cubes. You want to make sure that your butter is really cold. So if it softens after you cut it, you can pop it in the freezer or in the fridge for a little while, just to make sure that everything is really cold before you add it in to the food processor. So then just add in the 1 stick of cubed butter, and then measure out the wet ingredients.
1/4 cup fresh or canned pumpkin puree.
1/4 cup of half and half or whole milk. Either one of those work. I don't recommend using skim. Sorry, this isn't low fat. And 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. I like to mix those together in a measuring cup specifically for wet ingredients. It just makes it easier to pour into the food processor. And then I just mix those together with a whisk. Then process the butter and flour mixture together in the food processor until it looks somewhat sandy. But you want to make sure to have some larger pieces in there as well, almost like pea-size bits of butter. With the processor running, add in your wet ingredients. And as you can see, the mixture will start to come together. Remove the dough from the food processor and place it on a lightly floured surface. And then you just use your hands to form a large flat disc with the dough that's about a half of an inch or so thick. And you might need to add a tiny bit more flour if it sticks to your hands. Use a knife to cut the dough in half one way and then the opposite way, and this will make 4 large pieces. Then cut each of those pieces in half. So this will make it look like a pizza. And place the scones on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. And so if you want to freeze the scones, this is when you want to do it. So place it in the freezer, and once they're frozen, you can put them in a freezer-safe plastic bag and label them with a date. What I really like about these is that you can take them directly from the freezer to the oven. They might take a little bit longer to bake, but I do this all of the time. It's one of my favorite time savers for breakfast. But if you are planning on baking these right away, you can place them on the baking sheet lined with parchment paper. I place the baking sheet in the fridge for about 15 minutes because I want to make sure that the scones are really cold. So in the time that the scones are in the fridge, preheat your oven to 375 degrees. And then when your oven is heated, you can take the scones out and place them on a room temperature baking sheet lined with parchment paper and bake for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then allow to cool on a cooling rack. And as the scones cool, you can make the icing. For the icing, whisk together 1 cup of powdered sugar with half a teaspoon of the homemade pumpkin pie spice, and to that add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 1 tablespoon of real maple syrup, and 1 to 2 tablespoons of half and half or milk. And you can just mix all of these together with a whisk. If it's too liquidy, add a little bit more powdered sugar, and if it becomes too thick, add a little bit more of the milk or half and half. And just whisk it together until it's really well incorporated. And as you can see here, what you're looking for is that the icing holds that ribbon shape when you drizzle it. And a little trick, if you don't have a piping bag, you can actually use just a plastic bag. And my favorite way to do this is to place the plastic bag over a large glass, so it just prevents it from spilling all over the place. And that way you can use 2 hands to pour the icing in it, and then just fold it over the glass as you can see here, and then just pour the icing into the bag. And then after that, all you need to do is make sure all the icing is towards one corner of the bag, and cut that a very small little bit off of that corner, and that's your tip for your icing bag. And then all you really need to do is drizzle the icing in a very pretty way, if you can, over the scones. And that's it. That is how you make homemade pumpkin pie spice scones with maple spiced glaze. If you like this recipe and this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And like I said, the recipe is on my website, fromscratchwithmaria.com. All of the information will be in the description box below. You can find this recipe and many, many more. And if you guys are as excited about fall as I am, please leave it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.